Hello, welcome to 24 News. David Matlin coming to you live from Tel Aviv. As today, Israel marks a national day of mourning for the 45 people killed in that overcrowding accident at Mount Meron on late Thursday night, including a dozen teenagers and children. Now you see some of the victims' faces posted here, almost all of them now identified. Funerals are ongoing in what's become the deadliest peacetime disaster in Israel's history. Many of the victims were buried on Friday before the Sabbath, and identifications and burials resumed Saturday night. Now, flags are lowered to half-mast, and ceremonies are expected at the Knesset and other locations throughout the country. Now, to get more into just what occurred, we're joined in the studio by our correspondent, Emily Rose, who was there almost immediately after this. The next day, Emily, you were there speaking to people. For our viewers, what did you encounter there so fresh after that tragedy?
I have to say that the word that I used during that broadcast, and I think it still stands when I'm reflecting on it today, is pandemonium. There was chaos in the hours emanating from the event, and really what we heard from the people on the ground, and even a loudspeaker indicated this, calling the names of people because people really didn't know the whereabouts of their friends and relatives who had been there the night before. They were still searching for them, trying to locate them. There was sadness, there was confusion, but mostly an air of chaos. I had a conversation with some young men who had come there the night before expecting an evening of celebration, which of course descended into an evening of tragedy. So take a little listen to our conversation.
It was crazy. I was by a different fire, and all of a sudden, you just, like, this little lane in between just splits open, and no one knows what's happening. You're asking, why is there, like, lane splitting? You're trying to go. People are trying to move here. And we just find out that, like, I personally was walking. I see just body bags, people walking, and I just looked once, and I just didn't register, and then I just, like, whoa, there's actually dead human beings here, and we were just actually here. I went back to the place I'm staying. I came back now to help search for a very close friend of mine's younger brother. We just found out also, unfortunately, passed away. So yeah, it's, I don't know. I'm just a simple teenager from America, just here visiting. I would just really say it's all about just love the person next to you, unity. This is like a super, super sad time, but with God's help, we will all get through it together. Any event like this with this amount of people is going to be very, very hard. So the most respect and gratitude to all the service workers that came. Did a great job.
Difficult as it is to see, Emily, also given your close proximity to just being there in the aftermath here, there was a lot said about the efforts of the rescue services at the scene. We'll leave the talk about police for later discussion here, but the actual emergency rescuers who came, what did you see, what did you learn on the scene there?
Well, from what we heard in that interview, you can see that there was an air of gratitude coming from some for the way that emergency services jumped to the task and gave a robust response to the emergency. But we also heard from others who were not satisfied and actually angered by the response from the Israeli police. There was a woman who told me that this response was indicative and represented a divide that she saw within Israeli society between religious and secular. So she was not happy, and there were many who also echoed that feeling and that sentiment. When I spoke to a senior member of Magen David Adom, that's the Israeli equivalent of the Red Cross, earlier that day, I said, what kind of preparations did you have on the ground before you went in there? He said there were at least 230 ambulances already on site before the event even began in order to deal with any emergencies that may arise. And then once it did, they jumped to the task to try to take the wounded to hospitals across the country where they could be treated for their various wounds. So when we spoke to emergency officials, they were giving a robust response, and they continue to do so throughout the course of the day. I went to go report from that very narrow passageway that we see over and over again in the footage, which I'll just remind our viewers is so narrow, it's so hard to imagine hundreds of thousands of people walking through that narrow passageway. But narrow it is. And when I went to go report from there, there were still medics on the scene trying to deal with the aftermath, the trauma, and sort of piece together what was happening and where people were even the night before. People were also lighting candles, memorial candles at that very spot. And we saw as well a response from the Israeli security. The police tried to also manage the traffic, even the physical traffic, but also the human mass of people as they tried to exit even throughout the course of the day, which was also some kind of mayhem. So a robust response, I would say, throughout the course of the day, but still there was division and anger, not just optimism.
Certainly a lot of layers to the incident. Emily Rose, thanks for being with us and for sharing that personal upfront view you had just immediately in the aftermath. And jump to our correspondent, Alex.